The rain hammered against the windshield as I drove through the winding roads leading to my childhood home, each drop creating a rhythm that matched the pounding in my chest. The wipers scraped back and forth, a metronome counting down the minutes until I would have to face her again. My mother. The woman who had given me life and then spent the last 3 months accusing me of stealing it back, piece by piece, heirloom by heirloom. The leather steering wheel felt slick under my palms, whether from the humidity seeping through the old car's weather stripping or from my own nervous sweat, I couldn't tell. It had been 87 days since my father died. 87 days since I held his cooling hand in that sterile hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and defeat. 87 days since my mother looked at me across his body and said, with a voice like shattered glass, that she knew what I had done. That she knew I had been taking things. Precious things. Things that belonged to the family, to her, to my father's memory. I hadn't taken anything. Not a single item. But try telling that to a woman drowning in grief and paranoia, clinging to material possessions like life rafts in an ocean of loss. The house emerged from the gray curtain of rain like a ghost materializing from fog. It was a large colonial, white with black shutters, the kind of home that whispered old money and older secrets. The magnolia tree in the front yard, the one my father had planted when I was born 32 years ago, swayed violently in the wind, its branches scraping against the second-story windows with a sound like fingernails on glass. I pulled into the circular driveway, the gravel crunching under my tires, and sat there for a moment, engine running, heat blasting against the chill that had nothing to do with the October weather. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. A text from my brother, Marcus. He was already inside. The message was brief, just 3 words that made my stomach clench. She's on fire. I turned off the engine and the sudden silence was deafening, broken only by the rain's assault on the roof. Taking a deep breath that tasted like fear and resignation, I grabbed my purse and made a run for the front door. The rain was cold, almost icy, and it soaked through my jacket in seconds. I didn't bother knocking. This had been my home for 18 years. I still had my key, though I half expected my mother to have changed the locks. The door swung open and I was hit immediately by the smell of the house. It was different now, stale and closed up, lacking the warm scent of my father's coffee that used to greet me every morning of my childhood. Instead, there was something musty, something that spoke of windows kept shut and air that hadn't circulated in too long. The foyer was dark, the chandelier above unlit, and I could hear voices coming from the dining room. My mother's voice, sharp and accusatory, and Marcus trying to calm her down with his deep, measured tones. I hung my dripping jacket on the coat rack by the door, my hands trembling slightly as I smoothed down my damp hair. The hardwood floor creaked under my feet as I walked toward the dining room, each step feeling like a march toward execution. The house was too quiet except for those voices. No television murmuring in the background, no music playing softly from the kitchen radio. Just the rain outside and the argument ahead. When I stepped into the dining room, the scene before me was like a painting of family dysfunction. My mother sat at the head of the long mahogany table, the same table where we had shared thousands of meals, where I had done my homework, where my father had carved the Thanksgiving turkey every year with ceremonial precision. She looked smaller than I remembered, shrunken somehow, her gray hair pulled back in a severe bun that made her face look gaunt. She wore black, as she had every day since the funeral, and her eyes, when they landed on me, were hard as flint. Marcus stood near the window, his tall frame silhouetted against the gray light filtering through the rain-streaked glass. He was 35, 3 years older than me, and had always been the peacemaker in our family. His suit was rumpled, his tie loosened, and the expression on his face when he turned to look at me was one of exhausted relief. "Thank God you're here," his eyes said. "I can't do this alone." Sitting across from my mother was a man I didn't recognize. He was older, maybe 60, with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses. He wore a navy suit that looked expensive and had a leather briefcase open in front of him, papers spread across the table's surface. A lawyer, I realized. This was the estate lawyer my mother had hired to handle my father's will. And next to him, looking deeply uncomfortable, was another woman. She was younger, maybe 40, with kind eyes and a nervous smile. She held a tablet and kept glancing between my mother and the papers on the table. My mother's voice cut through the room like a blade. "There she is. The thief." The word hung in the air, ugly and accusatory. I felt my face flush hot despite the chill that had seeped into my bones from the rain. Marcus moved toward me, his hand reaching out as if to steady me, but I stepped past him, moving closer to the table. "I'm not a thief, Mom." I said it quietly, but firmly. My voice didn't shake, though everything inside me wanted to. "I haven't taken anything from this house. Not one thing." My mother's laugh was bitter, a sound I had never heard from her before my father died. It was the laugh of someone who had lost faith in everything, including her own daughter. She gestured to the empty spaces on the walls, the bare spots on the mantel visible through the doorway to the living room. "Then where are they, Cassandra? Where is your grandmother's silver tea set? Where are the paintings that hung in the hallway? Where is your father's watch collection?" I stared at her, confusion mixing with the anger that had been building for 3 months. "I don't know," I said. "I haven't been here. You told me not to come back. You said you never wanted to see me again." The lawyer cleared his throat, a diplomatic sound meant to cut through the tension. "Mrs. Whitmore, perhaps we should proceed with the inventory. That's why we're all here today, after all." My mother's jaw tightened, but she nodded curtly. The lawyer, who introduced himself as Richard Pemberton, gestured for me to sit. I took a chair next to Marcus, who reached under the table and squeezed my hand briefly. His palm was warm and slightly damp. He was nervous too. The woman with the tablet spoke for the first time, her voice soft and professional. "I'm Jennifer Hayes, the estate appraiser. I've been hired to conduct a complete inventory of the estate's contents and compare them against the documentation your father left behind." She paused, glancing at my mother before continuing. "Your father was very meticulous. He kept detailed records of every valuable item in this house, including photographs, purchase receipts, and appraisals." I felt something shift in my chest. My father had always been organized, almost obsessively so. He had a file for everything, a system for every aspect of his life. If he had documented the estate's contents, then there would be proof. Proof that I hadn't taken anything. Mr. Pemberton opened a thick folder and pulled out several sheets of paper. "According to your father's will and the accompanying inventory he prepared 6 months before his death, this estate contains approximately 237 items of significant value. These include furniture, artwork, jewelry, collectibles, and various family heirlooms." He looked at my mother, his expression neutral but his tone careful. "Mrs. Whitmore has reported that approximately 40 items are missing. She believes they were taken in the weeks following Mr. Whitmore's death. And I believe my daughter took them," my mother said, her voice cold and certain. "She was here. She had access. She had opportunity. Marcus finally spoke up, his voice tight with frustration. "Mom, that's insane. Cassie wouldn't do that. She loved Dad. She's grieving too." My mother's eyes snapped to him. "You always defend her. Ever since you were children, you've always taken her side." "Because she's usually right," Marcus shot back, and I felt a surge of gratitude toward my brother that almost brought tears to my eyes. Mr. Pemberton held up a hand. "Please. Let's proceed with the inventory. Miss Hayes has spent the last week cataloging everything in the house. We'll compare her findings with Mr. Whitmore's documentation. If items are indeed missing, we'll determine what happened to them." The next 2 hours were excruciating. Jennifer Hayes read through her tablet, listing item after item, while Mr. Pemberton checked them off against my father's inventory. The dining room grew darker as the afternoon wore on, and someone, Marcus I think, got up to turn on the lights. The chandelier above the table blazed to life, casting harsh shadows across my mother's face. Tiffany lamp from the study, present. Hayes read in her calm, professional voice. Waterford crystal vase, present. Set of 6 Chippendale chairs, present. Oil painting, landscape by Thomas Cole, present. With each item confirmed, I felt a small measure of relief. But my mother's face grew more pinched, more angry. She sat rigid in her chair, her hands clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles were white. Then Hayes paused. She scrolled through her tablet, frowned, and looked up at Mr. Pemberton. "I'm not finding the silver tea set. According to the notes, it should be in the china cabinet in the formal living room." My mother's head snapped up. "See? I told you. It's gone." Cassandra took it. I opened my mouth to protest, but Hayes continued. "However, I did find a receipt in Mr. Whitmore's study. It's dated 4 months ago. It appears he sold the tea set to an antique dealer in Charleston." She pulled out a piece of paper from a folder she had brought with her. "The receipt is for $12,500. The room went silent. My mother stared at Hayes as if she had spoken in a foreign language. "That's impossible," she finally said. "Robert would never sell that tea set. It belonged to his grandmother." Hayes slid the receipt across the table. My mother picked it up with shaking hands, her eyes scanning the paper. I could see the moment she recognized my father's signature at the bottom. Her face went pale, then flushed red. "Why would he sell it?" she whispered, more to herself than to anyone else. Mr. Pemberton made a note on his legal pad. "Let's continue," he said gently. The pattern repeated itself over and over. Hayes would note an item as missing. My mother would look at me with accusation burning in her eyes. And then Hayes would produce a receipt, a bill of sale, a record of my father selling the item. The paintings in the hallway, sold to a gallery in Savannah 8 months ago for $32,000. His watch collection, sold piece by piece to various collectors over the course of a year, totaling nearly $50,000. My grandmother's jewelry, sold to an estate buyer 6 months before his death for $18,000. With each revelation, my mother seemed to shrink further into herself. The anger drained from her face, replaced by confusion and something that looked like betrayal. Marcus and I exchanged glances across the table. Neither of us had known. Our father had sold off family heirlooms, valuable pieces of our history, and had told no one. When Hayes finally finished, the total was staggering. My father had sold 43 items over the course of 18 months, generating approximately $178,000. And none of us had known. Mr. Pemberton closed his folder and removed his glasses, cleaning them with a cloth from his pocket. The gesture seemed to give him time to choose his words carefully. Mrs. Whitmore, I need to share something else with you. Something your husband instructed me to reveal only after the inventory was complete. My mother looked up at him, her eyes red-rimmed but dry. She hadn't cried, not once during this entire ordeal. What? She asked, her voice hoarse. Pemberton pulled out another document, this one sealed in an envelope. Your husband left a letter. He wanted you to read it after you understood the extent of what he had done. He handed the envelope across the table. My mother stared at it as if it might bite her. Her hands trembled as she reached for it, and I noticed for the first time how thin she had become, how the skin on her hands looked almost translucent, showing the blue veins beneath. She broke the seal and pulled out several pages of my father's distinctive handwriting. The paper rustled in the quiet room as she unfolded it. She read in silence, her eyes moving across the lines. I watched her face, trying to read the emotions that flickered across it. Shock, disbelief, sorrow, and something else. Something that might have been understanding. When she finished, she carefully folded the letter and placed it on the table in front of her. She sat there for a long moment, staring at nothing, her breathing shallow and quick. Mom? Marcus said softly. What did it say? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stood up, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor with a sound that made me wince. She walked to the window and stood there, looking out at the rain that hadn't let up all afternoon. The gray light made her look older, more fragile than I had ever seen her. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. He was protecting me. Marcus and I looked at each other, confused. Protecting you from what? I asked. She turned to face us, and I saw tears on her cheeks now, silent and steady. From the truth. From the shame. From having to admit that we were broke. The words hung in the air like a bomb that had just detonated. Broke. The Whitmores, with their colonial house and their old money reputation, broke. It seemed impossible. Mr. Pemberton spoke up, his voice gentle but matter-of-fact. Your father made some poor investment decisions about 5 years ago. He lost a significant portion of your family's wealth. Rather than tell you, Mrs. Whitmore, he began quietly liquidating assets to maintain your lifestyle and pay the bills. The house has a second mortgage. The cars are leased, not owned. Your country club membership, your charity donations, your household expenses, all of it was being funded by the sale of family heirlooms. My mother sank back into her chair as if her legs could no longer support her. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. Our father, the man who had always seemed so confident, so in control, had been drowning in debt and had hidden it from all of us. Why didn't he tell us? Marcus asked, his voice rough with emotion. We could have helped. We could have done something. My mother picked up the letter again, her fingers tracing the words. He says here that he was ashamed. That he had failed as a husband, as a father, as a provider. She looked up at us, her eyes meeting mine for the first time without accusation. He says he knew he was dying. The cancer diagnosis came 2 years ago, not 6 months ago like he told us. He had been managing it, treating it quietly, but he knew it would eventually kill him. He wanted to make sure I would be taken care of, that there would be enough money left to keep the house, to maintain some dignity. The room felt too small suddenly, the air too thick. I stood up, needing to move, needing to do something with the energy that was crackling through my body. I walked to where my mother sat and knelt beside her chair. "Mom," I said, my voice breaking. "I didn't take anything. I would never." She looked down at me, and her hand came up to touch my face, her palm cool and soft against my cheek. "I know," she whispered. "I know that now. I'm so sorry, Cassandra. I was so angry, so scared, so lost without him. I needed someone to blame, and you were there, and I couldn't see past my own pain." I felt the tears come then, hot and fast, and I buried my face in her lap like I had when I was a child. Her hand stroked my hair, and I could feel her body shaking with her own sobs. Marcus came over and wrapped his arms around both of us, and we stayed like that for a long time, the three of us holding each other while the rain continued its assault on the windows and Mr. Pemberton and Ms. Hayes quietly gathered their papers and slipped out of the room. When we finally pulled apart, my mother's face was blotchy and swollen, but there was something different in her eyes. Something softer. She picked up my father's letter and held it out to me. "Read it," she said. "You both should read it." Marcus and I sat on either side of her, and I took the letter with trembling hands. My father's handwriting was shaky in places, evidence of how sick he had been when he wrote it, but his words were clear and deliberate. "My dearest Margaret," the letter began. "If you are reading this, then you know the truth. You know that I have failed you in ways I never imagined I could. You know that the life we built together was crumbling beneath us, and I was too proud, too ashamed, to ask for help. I made mistakes, terrible mistakes with our money. I trusted the wrong people, invested in the wrong ventures, and by the time I realized how bad things had gotten, it was too late to recover. I could have told you. I should have told you. But every time I tried, I saw the way you looked at me with such love and trust, and I couldn't bear to shatter that. I couldn't bear to see disappointment replace the pride in your eyes. So I did what I thought was best. I began selling our possessions, piece by piece, to keep us afloat. Each item I sold felt like cutting away a piece of our history, our family's legacy. But I told myself it was worth it if it meant you could continue living the life you deserved, the life I had promised you when we married 40 years ago. When the cancer diagnosis came, I was almost relieved. It gave me a deadline, a finish line. I knew I could manage things until then, could keep the illusion alive just a little longer. I increased my life insurance policy, took out loans against it. When I die, there will be enough to pay off the house, to leave you comfortable. Not wealthy, but secure. I know you will be angry when you learn the truth. I know you will feel betrayed. But please understand that everything I did out of love. Perhaps it was misguided love, perhaps it was pride masquerading as protection, but it was love nonetheless. I worry about what will happen after I'm gone. I worry that you will look for someone to blame, that you will turn your grief into anger. Please don't. Don't blame yourself, don't blame our children, don't blame the world. We had a good life, Margaret. We had love and laughter and 2 beautiful children who grew into remarkable adults. That is worth more than any amount of money, more than any heirloom or possession. If you are reading this with Cassandra and Marcus present, as I instructed Mr. Pemberton to arrange, then I hope you can see them clearly now. See how much they love you. See how much they loved me. They are not your enemies. They are your family, and they will be there for you in ways I no longer can. Forgive me, my love. Forgive me for my pride, for my secrets, for leaving you with this burden of truth. And please, forgive yourself for whatever anger you may have directed at those who don't deserve it. Life is too short, and love is too precious to waste on blame and recrimination. I will love you always, even from beyond. Take care of our children, and let them take care of you. Yours eternally, Robert. By the time I finished reading, my vision was blurred with tears. I handed the letter to Marcus, who read it silently, his jaw clenched tight. When he finished, he carefully folded it and gave it back to our mother. The three of us sat in silence for a while, each lost in our own thoughts. Outside, the rain had finally begun to ease, the drumming on the roof softening to a gentle patter. The light coming through the windows was changing, the gray giving way to the golden tones of late afternoon breaking through the clouds. I have to sell the house, my mother said suddenly. Her voice was steady, resigned. Even with the insurance money, I can't afford to maintain it. The property taxes alone are more than $15,000 a year, and the upkeep, the utilities, it's too much. Marcus leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. You could move in with Sarah and me. We have that guest suite on the first floor. It's yours if you want it. My mother smiled, a small, sad smile. That's kind of you, Marcus. But I think I need my own space. Something smaller, more manageable. Maybe a condo near the water. I've always loved the ocean. I reached over and took her hand. We'll help you, Mom. Whatever you need, we're here. She squeezed my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. I know. And I'm sorry, Cassandra. I'm so sorry for what I said, for what I accused you of. I was drowning in grief and fear, and I lashed out at the person who least deserved it. I shook my head. It's okay. We're all grieving. We all handle it differently. But it's not okay, she insisted. I hurt you. I damaged our relationship. I need you to know that I will spend however long it takes to make this right, to rebuild your trust. You already have, I said, and I meant it. Understanding my father's letter, seeing the pain and confusion my mother had been carrying, it put everything into perspective. She hadn't been cruel. She had been terrified and lost, grasping at explanations for a world that had suddenly stopped making sense. Mr. Pemberton returned to the dining room, clearing his throat softly to announce his presence. I apologize for the interruption, but there are a few more matters we need to discuss regarding the estate. We spent the next hour going over the details. The life insurance policy my father had taken out would indeed pay off the remaining mortgage and leave my mother with a modest nest egg. The house would need to be sold, but the market was good, and Mr. Pemberton estimated it would fetch around $800,000. After paying off the second mortgage and the remaining debts, my mother would have enough to buy a small condo and live comfortably, if modestly, for the rest of her life. There was also the matter of my father's personal effects. His clothes, his books, his papers. My mother looked overwhelmed at the thought of going through it all, so Marcus and I volunteered to help. We would do it together, the three of us, sorting through a lifetime of memories and deciding what to keep, what to donate, what to let go. As the meeting wrapped up and Mr. Pemberton and Miss Hayes prepared to leave, my mother walked them to the door. I could hear her thanking them, her voice warm and gracious despite everything. It was a glimpse of the woman she had been before grief had hardened her, and it gave me hope. When she returned to the dining room, she looked exhausted. The kind of exhaustion that comes not from physical exertion but from emotional upheaval. "Why don't you both stay for dinner?" she asked. "I don't have much, but I can make something. It would be nice to have the house feel alive again." Marcus looked at me, and I nodded. "We'd love to, Mom." She smiled, a real smile this time, and headed toward the kitchen. I heard her opening cabinets, the clink of pots and pans, the rush of water from the tap. Normal sounds. Comforting sounds. Marcus and I sat at the dining table, neither of us quite ready to move yet. "Can you believe all of this?" he said quietly. "Dad selling everything, hiding the cancer, the debt. It's like we didn't know him at all." I thought about that. Did we not know him, or did we just not know this part of him? He was still the man who taught us to ride bikes, who came to every school play and soccer game, who made terrible jokes at the dinner table and laughed at them himself. He was still Dad. He just had secrets, like everyone does. Marcus nodded slowly. "I guess you're right. It's just hard to reconcile the father we knew with the man who could hide something this big." "He was trying to protect us," I said. "Protect Mom." In his mind, he was being noble, taking care of his family the only way he knew how. By lying? Marcus's voice was sharp, but I could hear the hurt underneath. "By sacrificing," I corrected gently. "He sold his grandmother's tea set, his father's watch collection, things that meant something to him personally. He gave up pieces of his own history to try to preserve ours. It was misguided, maybe even wrong, but it came from love." Marcus was quiet for a moment, then he sighed. "You always were better at seeing the good in people." "Not always," I said, thinking of the last 3 months, of the anger and hurt I had carried, of the nights I had lain awake wondering how my own mother could think so little of me. "But I'm trying." From the kitchen came the smell of garlic and onion sautéing, the sizzle of something hitting a hot pan. My mother was humming, a tune I recognized from my childhood, something she used to sing while cooking Sunday dinners. The sound wrapped around me like a warm blanket, and I felt something in my chest loosen, some knot of tension I hadn't even realized I was carrying. Marcus and I got up and went to help. The kitchen was warm and bright, the overhead lights reflecting off the white subway tile backsplash. My mother stood at the stove, stirring something in a large pot. She had taken off her black cardigan and rolled up the sleeves of her blouse, and there was color in her cheeks from the heat of the stove. "What can we do?" I asked. She turned and smiled at me. "You can set the table. Use the everyday dishes, not the china. And Marcus, there's a bottle of wine in the pantry. I think we could all use a glass." As we moved around the kitchen, falling into old rhythms and patterns, I felt the weight of the day beginning to lift. We weren't fixed, not by a long shot. There would be more difficult conversations ahead, more tears, more moments of grief and anger and confusion. But we were together. We were family. And that, I was beginning to understand, was what my father had been trying to protect all along. Not the house or the heirlooms or the illusion of wealth. But this. The 3 of us, connected by blood and love and shared history. Dinner was simple. Pasta with marinara sauce, a salad from a bag, garlic bread from the freezer. But it tasted better than any meal I could remember. We sat at the kitchen table, not the formal dining room, and we talked. Really talked, for the first time in months. We talked about my father, sharing memories both funny and sad. We talked about the future, about selling the house and what that would mean. We talked about the past, about growing up in this house, about holidays and birthdays and ordinary Tuesday nights. My mother told us stories we had never heard before. About how she and my father had met at a college dance, how he had stepped on her feet 3 times before she agreed to see him again. About their wedding day, when it had rained just like today, and how they had taken it as a sign of good luck. About the early years of their marriage, when money had been tight and they had eaten ramen noodles for dinner more nights than not. I never told you kids about those years, she said, twirling pasta on her fork. Your father wanted you to think we had always been comfortable, always been secure. He wanted to give you a better childhood than he had. What was his childhood like? I asked. My father had rarely spoken about his early years, and I realized now how little I actually knew about his life before he became my dad. My mother's expression grew distant, remembering. He grew up poor. Really poor. His father worked in a factory, and his mother cleaned houses. They lived in a tiny apartment in a rough part of town. Your father was brilliant, though. He got a full scholarship to college, worked 3 jobs to pay for his expenses. He was determined to make something of himself, to prove that he was more than where he came from. That explains a lot, Marcus said quietly. Why he was so driven, why he cared so much about appearances. My mother nodded. He never wanted you to feel the shame he felt as a child. The shame of not having enough, of wearing second-hand clothes, of being the poor kid. So he built this life for us, this beautiful life, and when it started to crumble, he couldn't bear it. He couldn't bear the thought of failing you the way he felt his own parents had failed him. But they didn't fail him, I said. They did their best. They loved him. I know that, and you know that, but your father, she paused, searching for the right words. He carried that shame his whole life. It drove him to succeed, but it also made him terrified of failure. And when failure came anyway, as it does for all of us at some point, he didn't know how to handle it except to hide it. We sat in silence for a moment, digesting this new understanding of the man we had thought we knew so well. The kitchen clock ticked steadily on the wall, marking the passage of time that felt both too fast and too slow. I wish he had told us, Marcus said finally. I wish he had trusted us enough to share the burden. My mother reached across the table and took his hand. He did trust you. He trusted you to be strong, to take care of me when he was gone. He trusted Cassandra to forgive me when I lost my way. She looked at me, her eyes shining with unshed tears. And he was right to trust you both. You've been everything he believed you would be. The tears came again, but they were different this time. Not tears of anger or betrayal, but of grief and love and acceptance. We cried together, the 3 of us, and it felt like a release, like lancing a wound that had been festering for too long. After dinner, we moved to the living room. The empty spaces on the walls were stark reminders of what had been lost, but somehow they didn't seem as important anymore. My mother built a fire in the fireplace, something my father had always done on rainy evenings, and we sat around it, the flames casting dancing shadows on the walls. Marcus called his wife, Sarah, to let her know he would be home late. I could hear her voice through the phone, warm and understanding. She had been a rock for Marcus during these difficult months, and I made a mental note to thank her properly when I saw her next. My mother brought out photo albums, dusty from disuse, and we spent hours looking through them. Pictures of my father as a young man, lean and handsome with a full head of dark hair. Pictures of their wedding, my mother in a simple white dress, my father in a suit that looked too big for him. Pictures of Marcus and me as babies, as toddlers, as awkward teenagers. A visual history of our family, preserved in fading photographs and yellowing paper. "Look at this one," my mother said, pointing to a picture of my father holding me as a newborn. I was tiny, wrapped in a pink blanket, and he was looking down at me with an expression of such pure love and wonder that it made my heart ache. "He was so scared when you were born," she said softly. "Scared you wouldn't be a good father, scared you wouldn't be able to provide for you." I told him he was being ridiculous, that he was going to be an amazing dad. And he was. He really was, I agreed, my voice thick with emotion. We found pictures of family vacations. A trip to Disney World when I was 7 and Marcus was 10. A camping trip in the mountains where we all looked sunburned and happy. A cruise we had taken for my parents' 25th anniversary. In every picture, my father was smiling, his arm around my mother or his hand on one of our shoulders. He looked happy. He looked like a man who had everything he wanted. But now I could see something else in those pictures. A tightness around his eyes, a tension in his smile. The weight of secrets and worries that he carried alone. How had we not seen it? How had we not known? Because he didn't want us to know, my mother said, as if reading my thoughts. He was very good at hiding his pain. Too good, maybe. As the night wore on, the fire burned down to embers, and the rain outside finally stopped. The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the occasional drip of water from the eaves and the soft crackling of the dying fire. My mother had fallen asleep in her chair, her head tilted back, her breathing deep and even. She looked peaceful, more peaceful than I had seen her in months. Marcus and I covered her with a blanket and quietly cleaned up the kitchen. We worked in comfortable silence, washing dishes and putting away leftovers. It felt good to do something normal, something domestic and simple. When we finished, Marcus and I stood in the kitchen doorway, looking back at our mother sleeping in the living room. "She looks so small," he said quietly. "She's been through hell," I replied. "We all have." He turned to look at me. "Are you okay? Really okay? I know the last few months have been hard on you." I thought about the question. Was I okay? I had been accused of theft by my own mother, had been shut out of my family, had grieved my father while carrying the weight of false accusations. But standing here now, in this house that had been my home, with my brother beside me and my mother sleeping peacefully nearby, I realized that I was going to be okay. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually. "I will be," I said. "We all will be." Marcus pulled me into a hug, and I rested my head on his shoulder. He smelled like he always had, like the cologne he had worn since college and something uniquely him. "Thank you for coming today," he said. "I couldn't have done this without you." "Yes, you could have," I said. "But I'm glad you didn't have to." We stood there for a moment, two siblings who had weathered a storm and come out the other side battered but intact. Then Marcus pulled back and checked his watch. "I should get home. Sarah will be waiting up." "I'll stay," I said. "I don't want Mom to wake up alone." He nodded, understanding. "Call me tomorrow. We'll start making plans for sorting through Dad's things." After Marcus left, I went back to the living room and sat in the chair across from my mother. The fire had gone out completely now, leaving only the faint smell of wood smoke in the air. The house was quiet, so quiet I could hear the old grandfather clock in the hallway ticking away the seconds. I watched my mother sleep and thought about everything that had happened. The accusations, the inventory, the letter, the revelations. It felt like we had lived through years in the span of a single afternoon. My father's secrets had been laid bare, and in their exposure, we had found not just the truth about his financial struggles, but a deeper truth about love and sacrifice and the lengths people will go to protect those they care about. Had my father been wrong to hide his struggles? Probably. Had his pride and shame caused unnecessary pain? Absolutely. But had he loved us? Had he tried, in his flawed and human way, to take care of his family? Yes. Without question, yes. And my mother, who had lashed out in her grief and fear, who had accused me of terrible things, was she a bad person? No. She was a woman who had lost her partner of 40 years, who had discovered that the life she thought she knew was built on secrets and sacrifice. She had been drowning, and in her panic, she had pulled me under with her. But now we were both coming up for air, gasping and sputtering but alive. I must have dozed off because I woke to the sound of my mother stirring. The room was dark except for the pale light of dawn creeping through the windows. I had slept in the chair all night, and my neck was stiff, my back aching. Cassandra? My mother's voice was soft, confused. What are you doing here? I stayed, I said, stretching carefully. I didn't want you to be alone. She looked at me for a long moment, and I saw her eyes fill with tears. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for staying. Thank you for forgiving me. Thank you for being here. I got up and went to her, kneeling beside her chair like I had the day before. There's nothing to forgive, Mom. We're family. This is what we do. She cupped my face in her hands, her palms warm and slightly rough. When did you become so wise? She asked, a small smile playing at her lips. I learned from the best, I said, and I meant it. Despite everything, despite the secrets and the pain, my parents had taught me about love. Imperfect, complicated, messy love, but love nonetheless. We made coffee as the sun rose, standing side by side in the kitchen. The morning light was golden and clear, the storm having washed the world clean. Through the window, I could see the magnolia tree, its branches still dripping with rainwater, and beyond it, the first hints of autumn color in the trees that lined the property. What happens now? I asked, cradling my warm mug in my hands. My mother was quiet for a moment, looking out the window. Now we move forward, she said. We sell the house, I find a new place, and we figure out how to be a family again. A smaller family, a different family, but still a family. I nodded, sipping my coffee. It was strong and slightly bitter, the way my father had always made it. Are you scared? Terrified, she admitted. I've lived in this house for 35 years. I raised my children here. I buried my husband from here. Leaving feels like leaving behind everything I know. But you're not leaving us, I said. Marcus and we're not going anywhere. We'll help you through this. She reached over and squeezed my hand. I know. And that makes all the difference. We spent the morning going through my father's study. It was a room I had always loved, with its floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and the big oak desk where my father had worked on his papers and paid the bills. The leather chair behind the desk still held the impression of his body, and when I sat in it, I could smell his cologne, faint but unmistakable. The desk drawers were full of files, meticulously organized and labeled. My father's system was immediately apparent. Bills in one drawer, insurance documents in another, investment statements in a third. But there was also a drawer full of personal items. Birthday cards we had made for him as children, construction paper, and glitter and crooked letters spelling out "I love you, Daddy." Report cards from elementary school. A dried corsage from my high school prom. A program from Marcus's college graduation. He kept everything, my mother said, looking over my shoulder. Every little thing that mattered to him. We found more letters too. Letters my mother had written to my father during a brief separation early in their marriage, before Marcus and I were born. I didn't read them, they were too personal, but my mother did, tears streaming down her face as she revisited a difficult time in their relationship that they had overcome. "We almost didn't make it," she said, folding the letters carefully and putting them back in their envelopes. "That first year of marriage was so hard. We were both so young, so stubborn. We separated for 3 months, and I was sure it was over. But then he showed up at my apartment with flowers and these letters I had sent him, and he said he had read them every night and realized he couldn't live without me." She smiled through her tears. "We went to counseling, learned how to communicate better, and we made it work. 40 years we made it work." It was a reminder that every relationship, even the strongest ones, had their struggles. That love wasn't about perfection but about choosing each other, again and again, even when it was hard. In the bottom drawer of the desk, we found a journal. It was leather-bound, worn at the edges, and filled with my father's handwriting. My mother hesitated before opening it, her hand hovering over the cover. "Should we read it?" she asked. "It feels like an invasion of privacy." "I think you would want us to," I said gently. "I think he left it here for us to find." She opened it carefully, and we began to read. The journal spanned the last 5 years of my father's life, starting just after his financial troubles began. The entries were sporadic, sometimes weeks or months apart, but they painted a picture of a man struggling with shame and fear and love. "I lost another 50,000 today," one entry read. "The investment I was so sure about tanked. I don't know how to tell Margaret. I don't know how to admit that I've failed so spectacularly. So I won't tell her. I'll fix this. I have to fix this." Another entry, dated a year later. "Sold the silver tea set today. Margaret's grandmother's tea set. I felt like a thief, sneaking it out of the house while she was at her book club. But the money will keep us afloat for another few months. That's what matters. Keeping us afloat." And another, from 6 months before his death. "The doctor says the cancer is spreading. I have maybe a year, probably less. Part of me is relieved. I'm so tired of juggling, of lying, of pretending everything is fine. But I'm also terrified. What will happen to Margaret when I'm gone? Will she be okay? Will she forgive me?" The final entry was dated just 2 weeks before he died. "I've done everything I can. The insurance is in place, the house will be paid off, Margaret will be taken care of. I've written her a letter explaining everything. I hope she can understand. I hope Cassandra and Marcus can understand. I did it all for love. Misguided, perhaps, but love nonetheless. If I could do it over, would I do things differently? I don't know. Maybe. Probably. But I can't go back. I can only hope that in the end, they remember the good times more than the bad. That they remember I loved them with everything I had." My mother closed the journal and held it against her chest, her eyes closed, her breathing uneven. We sat in silence for a long time, the weight of my father's words settling over us like a blanket. He was so alone, she finally said, carrying all of this by himself. I wish I had known. I wish I could have helped him carry the burden. Maybe he needed to carry it himself, I said. Maybe that was part of who he was, for better or worse. She nodded slowly. I just wish I had told him more often that it was okay to not be perfect. That I loved him not because of what he could provide, but because of who he was. I think he knew, I said. Deep down, I think he knew. Marcus arrived around noon with Sarah and their 2 kids, my niece Emma, who was 8, and my nephew Jake, who was 6. The house, which had been so quiet and heavy with emotion, suddenly filled with the sound of children's laughter and running feet. It was exactly what we needed. Emma and Jake had no idea about the adult dramas that had been unfolding. To them, this was just a visit to Grandma's house, a chance to explore the big old home and play in the yard. My mother's face lit up when she saw them, and she scooped them both into a hug, holding them tight. Sarah pulled me aside while the kids were distracted. "How is she?" she asked quietly. Marcus told me everything. "She's better," I said. "We're all better. It's been hard, but I think we're going to be okay." Sarah squeezed my arm. "I'm glad. And I'm sorry for what you went through. Being accused like that, it must have been awful." "It was," I admitted. "But I understand why it happened. Grief makes people do strange things." "You're very forgiving," Sarah said, and there was admiration in her voice. "I'm trying to be," I replied. "Life's too short to hold grudges, especially against the people you love." We ordered pizza for lunch, and we all sat around the kitchen table, the kids chattering about school and friends and the Halloween costumes they were planning. It was wonderfully normal, a reminder that life went on even in the midst of loss and change. After lunch, my mother took the kids out to the backyard to show them the garden. Through the window, I watched her pointing out different plants, letting Emma pick the last of the autumn flowers, helping Jake collect interesting rocks. She was smiling, really smiling, and it warmed my heart. Marcus, Sarah, and I stayed inside, beginning the process of sorting through my father's belongings. His clothes would be donated, except for a few special items. His favorite sweater, the one he wore every Christmas morning. His college sweatshirt, faded and soft from years of wear. His wedding suit, carefully preserved in a garment bag. We found boxes of old photographs that hadn't made it into albums. Pictures of my father as a child, serious and thin, standing in front of a run-down apartment building. Pictures of his parents, my grandparents who had died before I was born. They looked tired but proud, their arms around their young son. Pictures of my father in college, surrounded by friends, looking happy and hopeful and young. "This is who he was before he became Dad," Marcus said, holding up a picture of our father at what looked like a college party, a beer in his hand and a huge grin on his face. "It's strange to think of him as just a regular guy, you know? Not a father or a husband, just Robert." I took the picture and studied it. He looked so carefree, so unburdened. What happened to that guy? I wondered aloud. "Life happened," Sarah said gently. "Responsibility, family, the weight of trying to be everything to everyone. It happens to all of us, in one way or another." We worked through the afternoon, sorting and packing, reminiscing, and occasionally crying. It was cathartic, this process of going through a life, of deciding what to keep and what to let go. Each item told a story, and together they formed a narrative of a man who had been complex and flawed and deeply human. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. We gathered in the living room. The kids were tired from playing outside, curled up on the couch with my mother between them. Marcus and Sarah sat in the armchairs, and I sat on the floor, my back against the couch, my mother's hand resting on my shoulder. "We should do this more often," my mother said. "All of us together. Not just for holidays or special occasions, but just because. Life is too short and family is too important." We all agreed. In the wake of loss, we had rediscovered each other, and none of us wanted to lose that connection again. Over the next few weeks, we fell into a routine. Marcus and I would come over on weekends to help my mother sort through the house and prepare it for sale. We hired a real estate agent, a kind woman named Patricia who had sold homes in the neighborhood for 20 years. She walked through the house with a professional eye, suggesting minor repairs and updates that would help it sell faster. The house went on the market in early November, just as the leaves were reaching their peak color. The listing photos made it look beautiful, warm, and inviting, a family home full of potential. My mother cried when she saw them, but they were good tears, bittersweet tears of letting go. The first showing was on a Saturday afternoon. My mother stayed with me at my apartment, unable to bear being there while strangers walked through her home. We drank tea and watched old movies, and I held her hand when she needed it. Patricia called that evening. There had been 3 showings, and 2 of the families were very interested. One couple, she said, had young children and had fallen in love with the backyard and the magnolia tree. They could imagine their kids growing up there, making memories like we had. My mother smiled through her tears. "That's good," she said. "The house should have children in it again. It should have life and laughter." Within a week, we had an offer. It was a good offer, fair and close to asking price. My mother accepted it, and just like that, the house that had been in our family for 35 years belonged to someone else. Well, it would in 60 days, after the closing. Those 60 days passed in a blur. My mother found a condo she loved, a 2-bedroom unit in a building near the beach. It had a balcony with an ocean view and a small community of other retirees. She seemed excited about it, about starting fresh, about building a new life. We helped her move in early January, on a cold but sunny day. The condo was bright and modern, so different from the old colonial house. My mother had kept only the essentials and a few sentimental items. The rest had been sold or donated or divided between Marcus and me. As we unpacked boxes and arranged furniture, I realized that this wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. My mother was starting a new chapter, one where she wasn't defined by the house she lived in or the possessions she owned, but by the relationships she had and the life she chose to live. That night, after everything was unpacked and Marcus and Sarah had gone home, my mother and I sat on her new balcony, wrapped in blankets against the chill, watching the waves roll in under the moonlight. The sound of the ocean was soothing, rhythmic, and eternal. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For everything. For forgiving me, for helping me through this, for being here." "You don't have to thank me," I said. "You're my mom. This is what family does." She was quiet for a moment, then she said, "I've been thinking a lot about your father lately. About his letter, about his journal, about all the secrets he kept. And I've realized something." "What's that?" I asked. "That I forgive him," she said. "For the lies, for the secrets, for trying to carry everything alone. I forgive him because I understand now that he was doing the best he could with what he had. We all are." We're all just stumbling through life, making mistakes, trying to protect the people we love. Sometimes we get it right, and sometimes we get it spectacularly wrong. But as long as we're trying, as long as we're coming from a place of love, that has to count for something. I reached over and took her hand. It counts for everything, I said. We sat there for a long time, mother and daughter, watching the ocean and thinking about the past and the future. The past, with all its pain and secrets and loss. The future, uncertain but full of possibility. And the present, this moment right here, where we were together, and that was enough. In the months that followed, my mother settled into her new life. She joined a book club and a yoga class. She made friends with her neighbors. She volunteered at a local animal shelter, something she had always wanted to do but never had time for. She seemed lighter somehow, unburdened by the weight of maintaining appearances and living up to expectations. Marcus and I made good on our promise to see her more often. We had dinner together every Sunday, rotating between her place, his place, and mine. The kids loved visiting Grandma at the beach, and my mother loved spoiling them with ice cream and letting them stay up past their bedtime. We talked about my father often, but the conversations were different now. Less painful, more celebratory. We remembered the good times, the funny moments, the ways he had shaped us into the people we had become. We acknowledged his flaws and his mistakes, but we didn't let them define him. He had been human, beautifully and tragically human, and we loved him for it. On the first anniversary of his death, we gathered at my mother's condo. We had planned to visit his grave, but my mother suggested something different. "Let's go to the beach," she said. "Your father loved the ocean. Let's celebrate his life there." So we did. We walked along the shore, the sand cool beneath our feet, the wind whipping our hair. Emma and Jake ran ahead, chasing seagulls and collecting shells. Marcus and Sarah walked hand in hand, talking quietly. And my mother and I walked together, our arms linked, our steps matching. "I miss him," my mother said. "Every single day, I miss him. But I'm grateful too. Grateful for the years we had, grateful for the children we raised, grateful for the love we shared. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours." I leaned my head on her shoulder. "He would be proud of you," I said. "Of how strong you've been, of how you've rebuilt your life." She laughed softly. "I don't know about strong. Most days I feel like I'm barely holding it together. But I'm trying. That's all any of us can do, right? Just keep trying." We stopped walking and stood there, looking out at the vast expanse of ocean. The water stretched to the horizon, endless and powerful and beautiful. It made our problems seem small, our lives just tiny moments in the grand scheme of things. But those moments mattered. They mattered to us, and that made them important. My mother reached into her pocket and pulled out a small box. Inside was my father's wedding ring, the simple gold band he had worn for 40 years. She held it in her palm, the metal catching the sunlight. "I thought about burying this with him," she said. "But I couldn't. I wanted to keep a piece of him with me. But now I think it's time to let go." She drew her arm back and threw the ring as far as she could. It arced through the air, glinting in the sun, and disappeared into the waves with a small splash that we couldn't hear over the sound of the surf. It was a symbolic gesture, a way of releasing the past and embracing the future. We stood there for a moment longer, then my mother turned to me and smiled. "Come on," she said. "Let's go catch up with the others." I promised Emma I'd help her build a sandcastle. As we walked back down the beach, I thought about everything that had happened over the past year. The accusations, the revelations, the grief, the healing. It had been the hardest year of my life, but it had also been transformative. We had been broken, all of us, but we had put ourselves back together. Not the same as before, but stronger. More honest. More connected. The estate inventory that had seemed so devastating at first had turned out to be a gift. It had forced us to confront the truth, to see past the illusions and the secrets to the real people underneath. My father, with his pride and his shame and his desperate love. My mother, with her grief and her fear and her capacity for forgiveness. Marcus and me, with our loyalty and our resilience and our determination to hold our family together. We weren't perfect. We never would be. But we were real, and we were trying, and we were there for each other. And in the end, that was what mattered most. As I watched my mother kneel in the sand next to Emma, helping her pack wet sand into a bucket, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. We had survived the storm. We had made it through the darkest days. And now, here on this beach with the sun warming our faces and the sound of children's laughter filling the air, we were beginning to heal. The house was gone, sold to a young family who would make their own memories there. The heirlooms were gone, sold to pay debts and keep us afloat. My father was gone, his body in the ground, but his presence still felt in every story we told and every lesson he had taught us. But we remained. The three of us, and Marcus's family, and whatever future generations would come. We remained, and we would carry forward the best parts of what we had been given while learning from the mistakes that had been made. That evening, we had dinner at a seafood restaurant overlooking the water. The kids were tired and sandy, and they fell asleep in their chairs before dessert arrived. We adults talked quietly, sipping wine and watching the sun set over the ocean. The sky turned brilliant shades of orange and red and purple, a spectacular display that felt like a benediction. My mother raised her glass. "To Robert," she said. "To his memory, to his love, and to the family he left behind. May we honor him by living fully, loving deeply, and forgiving freely." We clinked our glasses together, the sound clear and bright in the evening air. "To Dad," Marcus and I said in unison. As we drove home that night, I thought about the title of this story, the one that had been running through my head for months. Sweet Home, or Not. The home of my childhood was gone, but I had learned that home wasn't a place. It was the people you loved, the connections you maintained, the memories you carried with you. Home was my mother's hand in mine. Home was Marcus's steady presence. Home was the sound of my niece and nephew's laughter. Home was wherever we were together. The estate inventory had revealed more than just missing items and financial secrets. It had revealed the truth about who we were as a family, stripped of pretense and illusion. And that truth, while painful, had set us free. Free to be imperfect, free to make mistakes, free to love each other without conditions or expectations. My father had spent his life trying to provide for us, to give us security and comfort and a life free from the shame he had felt as a child. In the end, what he had given us was something far more valuable. He had given us each other. He had given us a family that, despite everything, could weather any storm. He had given us the capacity to forgive, to understand, to love even when it was hard. And my mother, who had accused me in her grief and fear, had given me something too. She had shown me that people can change, that healing is possible, that love is stronger than anger. She had shown me that it's never too late to say I'm sorry, to make amends, to start over. As for me, I had learned that I was stronger than I thought. That I could withstand false accusations and family conflict and still come out the other side with my heart intact. That forgiveness wasn't weakness but strength. That holding on to anger only hurt myself, while letting it go freed me to live fully. The months continued to pass, and life settled into a new normal. My mother thrived in her condo by the beach. She started dating, which surprised all of us, a kind widower named Frank who lived in her building and made her laugh. She was careful to tell us that no one could replace our father, and we assured her we understood. We were happy to see her happy, to see her embracing life instead of just enduring it. Marcus got a promotion at work, and Sarah went back to school to finish her degree. Emma lost her first tooth, and Jake learned to ride a bike. Life went on, as it always does, full of small joys and minor setbacks and the everyday moments that make up a life. I started seeing a therapist, something I probably should have done months earlier. It helped to talk through everything that had happened, to process the complex emotions I had been carrying. My therapist helped me see that my father's actions, while misguided, came from a place of love. That my mother's accusations, while hurtful, came from a place of pain. That I didn't have to choose between understanding their perspectives and acknowledging my own hurt. I could hold both truths at once. On what would have been my parents' 41st wedding anniversary, my mother invited Marcus and me to her condo for dinner. She cooked my father's favorite meal, pot roast with potatoes and carrots, the same meal she had made for him every year on their anniversary. We ate and told stories and laughed and cried, and it felt right. It felt like honoring his memory without being trapped by it. After dinner, my mother brought out a box. "I've been going through some things," she said, "and I found these. I want you each to have them." Inside the box were letters. Letters my father had written to each of us over the years but never sent. Birthday letters, graduation letters, letters of advice and encouragement and love. There were dozens of them, spanning our entire lives. I read mine that night, curled up in my old bedroom at my apartment, tears streaming down my face. My father's words were full of pride and love and hope for my future. He wrote about watching me grow up, about the person I was becoming, about how much he believed in me. In one letter, written just months before he died, he apologized for not being perfect, for making mistakes, for not always knowing the right thing to do. But he said he had always tried his best, and he hoped that would be enough. It was enough, I whispered to the empty room. It was more than enough. The letters became treasures, more valuable than any heirloom or possession. They were pieces of my father's heart, given freely and without expectation. They were proof that he had seen us, really seen us, and loved what he saw. Marcus and I talked about the letters over coffee a few days later. His were similar to mine, full of fatherly pride and gentle guidance. We both agreed that finding them had been a gift, a final message from beyond the grave that reminded us of what really mattered. "You know what's funny?" Marcus said, stirring sugar into his coffee. "All those things Dad sold, all those heirlooms and valuables, I don't even remember most of them. But these letters, his words, these I'll keep forever." I nodded. Things are just things. They can be replaced or forgotten. But words, memories, love, those last forever. As spring arrived, bringing with it new growth and warmer weather, I found myself thinking less about what we had lost and more about what we had gained. We had gained honesty, the freedom to be imperfect, the knowledge that our family could survive anything. We had gained a deeper understanding of each other and ourselves. We had gained perspective on what truly mattered in life. My mother planted a garden on her balcony, filling pots with flowers and herbs. She said it reminded her of the garden at the old house, but better because it was manageable, something she could care for without feeling overwhelmed. She gave us cuttings and seeds, and soon Marcus and I had our own little gardens, connected to hers and to each other. On Mother's Day, we surprised her with a photo album. We had gathered pictures from throughout our lives, from childhood to the present, and arranged them chronologically. But we had also included new photos, pictures from the past few months of our rebuilt family. Pictures of Sunday dinners and beach walks and ordinary moments that had become extraordinary because we were together. My mother cried when she saw it, happy tears that she didn't try to hide. "This is beautiful," she said, turning the pages slowly, savoring each image. "This is what your father wanted. For us to be together, to be happy, to remember that family is everything." We spent the afternoon on her balcony, the ocean breeze keeping us cool, the sound of the waves providing a soothing backdrop. Emma and Jake played with sidewalk chalk on the patio below, their laughter drifting up to us. Marcus and Sarah sat close together, his arm around her shoulders. And my mother and I sat side by side, our hands clasped, watching the people we loved most in the world. "I never thought I'd be happy again," my mother said quietly. "After your father died, after everything that happened, I thought the best parts of my life were behind me. But I was wrong. There's still so much joy to be found, so much love to give and receive. Your father's death wasn't the end of our story. It was just the end of a chapter. And the beginning of a new one," I added. She squeezed my hand. "Yes. A new chapter. And I'm grateful to be writing it with all of you." As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant colors, I reflected on the journey we had taken. From accusation to understanding, from anger to forgiveness, from brokenness to healing. It hadn't been easy. There had been moments when I thought our family might not survive, when the pain and betrayal felt too great to overcome. But we had survived. More than that, we had grown. The estate inventory, which had seemed like such a catastrophe at the time, had actually been a catalyst. It had forced us to confront uncomfortable truths, to have difficult conversations, to see each other as we really were rather than as we wanted to be seen. And in that raw honesty, we had found something precious. We had found authenticity, vulnerability, and a deeper connection than we had ever had before. My father's secrets had been revealed, but so had his love. His pride had caused pain, but his sacrifice had also provided for us. He had been flawed and human and doing his best in impossible circumstances. And in understanding that, and accepting his imperfections, we had learned to accept our own. My mother had lashed out in her grief, had accused me of terrible things, had pushed me away when she needed me most. But she had also found the courage to apologize, to admit she was wrong, to do the hard work of rebuilding our relationship. She had shown me that it's never too late to make things right, that love can survive even the deepest wounds. And I had learned that I was capable of forgiveness, of empathy, of seeing beyond my own hurt to understand the pain of others. I had learned that holding on to anger only poisoned myself, while letting it go freed me to love more fully. I had learned that family isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up, even when it's hard. It's about choosing each other, again and again, even when you're hurt or angry or disappointed. As darkness fell and the stars began to appear in the sky above the ocean, we gathered the kids and prepared to head home. My mother hugged each of us tightly, holding on a little longer than necessary, as if she was afraid we might disappear if she let go. I love you all so much," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for being patient while I found my way back." "We love you too, Mom," Marcus and I said together, and we meant it with every fiber of our beings. Driving home that night, I thought about the title that had been haunting me. Sweet Home or Not? I realized now that the answer was both. The home of my childhood had been sweet, filled with love and laughter and security. But it had also been built on secrets and shame and the crushing weight of expectations. The loss of that home had been painful, but it had also been necessary. It had forced us to build something new, something more honest and authentic and real. Our new home, the one we were creating together in the aftermath of loss, was sweeter than the old one had ever been. Because it was built on truth instead of illusion, on acceptance instead of perfection, on forgiveness instead of judgment. It was a home where we could be ourselves, flaws and all, and still be loved. It was a home where mistakes were acknowledged and learned from rather than hidden and denied. It was a home where love was expressed not through material possessions but through presence, through showing up, through choosing each other every single day. The estate inventory had revealed a surprising list indeed. Not just of missing items and financial transactions, but of love and sacrifice and the complex ways families navigate loss and change. It had revealed that my father had loved us enough to sacrifice his pride and his possessions. That my mother had loved us enough to admit when she was wrong and do the hard work of making amends. That Marcus and I had loved each other and our parents enough to fight for our family even when it would have been easier to walk away. And it had revealed something about me too. That I was stronger than I had known. That I could withstand false accusations and family conflict and still come out the other side with my capacity for love intact. That I could forgive without forgetting, understand without excusing, and move forward without leaving the past behind. The months turned into years, and our family continued to grow and change. My mother eventually married Frank, a quiet ceremony on the beach with just family present. Marcus and Sarah had another baby, a little girl they named Margaret after my mother, who cried happy tears when they told her. I met someone too, a kind man named David who understood about complicated families and the importance of forgiveness. We still had our Sunday dinners, though now they included more people, more laughter, more love. We still talked about my father, keeping his memory alive through stories and traditions. We visited his grave on his birthday and on the anniversary of his death, bringing flowers and sitting in the grass, telling him about our lives and the family he had left behind. The old house, the one we had grown up in, became a distant memory. We drove by it once, a few years after it had sold, and saw a swing set in the backyard and toys scattered on the lawn. Children's bicycles leaned against the garage, and through the window we could see people moving around inside, living their lives, making their own memories. It made us smile. The house had a new family now, and that was as it should be. My mother's condo by the beach became the new gathering place, the new center of our family universe. It was smaller than the old house, cozier, but it held just as much love. Maybe more, because that love was freely given and gratefully received, not weighed down by expectations or appearances or the need to maintain an illusion. On the 5th anniversary of my father's death, we held a celebration of life on the beach. We invited extended family and friends, people who had known and loved my father. We shared stories and looked at photos and laughed at the funny memories. We didn't shy away from the difficult parts of his story, the secrets and the struggles, because those were part of who he was too. But we celebrated the whole man, not just the perfect image he had tried to project. My mother gave a speech, standing on the sand with the ocean behind her, her voice strong and clear. Robert was not a perfect man, she said. He made mistakes, kept secrets, let his pride get in the way of asking for help. But he was a good man. He loved his family with everything he had. He worked hard, he sacrificed, he tried his best. And in the end, isn't that all any of us can do? Try our best, love as hard as we can, and hope that it's enough. There wasn't a dry eye on the beach. We raised our glasses in a toast, to Robert, to his memory, to the lessons he had taught us both in life and in death. And then we celebrated, because that's what he would have wanted. We ate and drank and told stories and laughed until our sides hurt. We played with the kids and walked along the shore and watched the sunset paint the sky in impossible colors. As the evening wound down and people began to leave, my mother pulled me aside. She looked tired but happy, the lines around her eyes deeper than they had been 5 years ago, but her smile more genuine. "Thank you," she said, "for organizing this, for bringing everyone together, for keeping your father's memory alive." "It was my pleasure," I said. And I meant it. Honoring my father's memory, complicated as it was, felt important. It felt like closing a circle, like bringing our story full circle from pain to healing to celebration. She hugged me tight, and I breathed in the scent of her perfume, the same one she had worn my entire life. "I'm so proud of you, Cassandra. Proud of the woman you've become, proud of how you handled everything that happened. You have your father's strength and your own unique grace. It's a powerful combination." I felt tears prick my eyes. "Thank you, Mom. That means everything to me." We stood there for a moment, mother and daughter, watching the last of the guests say their goodbyes. The sky was darkening, stars beginning to appear, and the sound of the waves was a constant, soothing presence. This is home now, I thought. Not a building or a place, but this feeling. This connection. This love. In the years that followed, I often thought about that rainy day when I had driven to my childhood home, terrified of facing my mother's accusations. I thought about the estate inventory, about Mr. Pemberton and Ms. Hayes methodically going through the list of missing items. I thought about the moment when we realized the truth, when my father's secrets were laid bare and we had to decide how to respond. We could have let it destroy us. We could have let the anger and betrayal and hurt tear our family apart. Many families would have. But we chose differently. We chose to understand, to forgive, to rebuild. And that choice, made in the midst of pain and confusion, had changed everything. I shared this story with David one night as we sat on my balcony, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance. He listened quietly, holding my hand, and when I finished, he was silent for a long moment. "That's an incredible story," he finally said. "Your family went through hell and came out stronger. That's rare." I nodded. "We got lucky, I think. Lucky that we were willing to do the work, lucky that we loved each other enough to fight for our relationships, lucky that we had the capacity to forgive." "It's not luck," he said gently. "It's choice. You all chose each other, over and over again. That's not luck. That's love." His words stayed with me, echoing in my mind. He was right. It had been a choice, a series of choices, made day after day, moment by moment. The choice to show up even when it was hard. The choice to listen even when we wanted to defend ourselves. The choice to forgive even when we were still hurting. The choice to love even when it would have been easier to walk away. Those choices had built something beautiful. Not perfect, never perfect, but real and honest and strong. A family that could weather any storm because we had already weathered the worst and survived. A family that knew each other's flaws and loved each other anyway. A family that understood that home wasn't a place but a feeling, a connection, a choice to belong to each other. My mother lived to see all her grandchildren graduate from high school. She lived to dance at Marcus's daughter Margaret's wedding. She lived to meet my children, twins I had with David, a boy and a girl we named Robert and Grace. She held them in her arms and cried happy tears, and she told them stories about their grandfather, the man they would never meet but whose legacy lived on in all of us. When my mother passed away, peacefully in her sleep at the age of 83, we gathered once again on the beach. We scattered her ashes in the ocean, next to where she had thrown my father's wedding ring all those years ago. We imagined them together again, reunited in the vast expanse of the sea, their love eternal and unbound by the limitations of earthly life. At the memorial service, I gave the eulogy. I talked about my mother's strength, her capacity for forgiveness, her ability to rebuild her life after devastating loss. I talked about the difficult year after my father's death, about the accusations and the pain and the eventual healing. I didn't shy away from the hard parts, because those were what made the story meaningful. Those were what made her journey remarkable. My mother taught me that it's never too late to make things right, I said, looking out at the gathered crowd of family and friends. She taught me that love is stronger than anger, that forgiveness is more powerful than resentment, that family is worth fighting for even when it's hard. She made mistakes, as we all do, but she had the courage to admit them and the strength to make amends. That's the legacy she left me, and it's one I will carry with me for the rest of my life. After the service, Marcus and I stood together, watching the sun set over the ocean one more time. We were older now, grayer, marked by time and experience. But we were still standing, still together, still choosing each other. Do you ever think about that day? Marcus asked. The day of the inventory? All the time, I admitted. It was the worst day and the best day all at once. The day everything fell apart and the day we started putting it back together. He nodded. I think about Dad's letter. About how scared he was, how alone he felt. I wish I could go back and tell him it was okay, that we would understand, that we would still love him. I think he knew, I said. Deep down, I think he knew. That's why he left the letter, why he documented everything. He knew we would find out eventually, and he trusted us to handle it with grace. We did handle it with grace, Marcus said. Eventually. After some stumbling and pain and mistakes. But we got there. That's all anyone can ask for, I replied. Not perfection, but effort. Not flawlessness, but growth. Not immediate forgiveness, but eventual understanding. We stood in comfortable silence, two siblings who had been through fire together and emerged stronger. The ocean stretched before us, vast and eternal, a reminder that our problems, as overwhelming as they had seemed, were small in the grand scheme of things. But they had been our problems, our pain, our journey. And we had walked it together. In the years that followed my mother's death, I found myself becoming the keeper of family stories. I was the one who remembered the details, who could tell the grandchildren about their great-grandparents, who kept the photo albums and the letters and the memories alive. It was a role I embraced, understanding now how important it was to preserve our history, both the beautiful parts and the difficult ones. I told my children about their grandfather Robert, about his struggles and his secrets and his overwhelming love for his family. I told them about their grandmother Margaret, about her grief and her accusations and her remarkable capacity for forgiveness and growth. I told them about the estate inventory, about the day we discovered the truth, about how our family almost fell apart but chose to come together instead. "Why are you telling us the hard parts?" my daughter Grace asked one day. She was 12, old enough to understand complexity but young enough to still believe in fairy tale endings. "Why not just tell us the good stuff?" "Because the hard parts are what make the good parts meaningful," I explained. "Anyone can love someone when everything is easy. The real test of love is whether you can stick together when things get difficult. Your grandparents, your Uncle Marcus and I, we proved that we could. And I want you to know that, so that when you face hard times in your own life, you will remember that you come from a family that doesn't give up." She thought about that for a moment, then nodded. "I get it. It's like, the struggle is part of the story." "Exactly," I said, pulling her close. "The struggle is part of the story. And our story, as hard as it was sometimes, is a good one. Because it's about love and forgiveness and family. And those are the things that matter most." My son Robert, named after his grandfather, was quieter, more introspective. He spent hours looking through the old photo albums, studying the pictures of the grandfather he had never met. One day, when he was 15, he came to me with a question. "Do you think Grandpa Robert was a good person?" he asked. "I mean, he lied to everyone. He kept secrets. He let Grandma think you stole things. That doesn't seem very good." I considered the question carefully. It was a fair one, and it deserved an honest answer. "I think he was a flawed person who tried to be good," I said. "He made mistakes, big ones. But he made them out of love, out of a desire to protect his family. Does that excuse what he did? No. But does it make him a bad person? I don't think so. I think it makes him human." Robert thought about that, his young face serious. "So being a good person isn't about never making mistakes?" "No," I said. "Being a good person is about trying your best, loving as hard as you can, and being willing to admit when you're wrong. Your grandfather did 2 out of 3. He tried his best and loved as hard as he could. He just couldn't bring himself to admit he was wrong until it was too late. But your grandmother, she did all 3. She made a terrible mistake accusing me, but she admitted it and made it right. That's what made her truly good." "I want to be like that," Robert said quietly. "Like Grandma. Someone who can admit when they're wrong and fix it." I hugged him tight, my heart swelling with pride. "Then you're already on the right path," I said. "Just knowing that about yourself, wanting that, that's half the battle." These conversations with my children, these moments of passing down family wisdom and history, felt sacred. They were the continuation of a story that had begun long before I was born and would continue long after I was gone. They were the proof that my father's sacrifices, my mother's forgiveness, and our family's healing had meaning beyond just our own lives. They were shaping the next generation, teaching them about resilience and love and the importance of family. Marcus and I made a pact to stay close, to never let the distance that had threatened to tear us apart during that difficult year creep back in. We had dinner together at least once a month, our families gathering around a table laden with food and laughter. We celebrated birthdays and holidays and ordinary Tuesdays. We showed up for each other's kids' school plays and soccer games and dance recitals. We were present, actively and intentionally present, in each other's lives. On the 10th anniversary of my father's death, Marcus and I returned to the old house. We hadn't been back since that day we had driven by and seen the new family's toys in the yard. But now we felt ready to face the ghosts of our past and make peace with them. The house looked different. The new owners had painted it a soft gray instead of white, and they had added a porch swing and flower boxes under the windows. The magnolia tree, my father's tree, was still there, taller and fuller than I remembered. It was in bloom, the white flowers filling the air with their sweet, heavy scent. We stood on the sidewalk, not wanting to intrude on the current resident's property, just looking at the house and remembering. So many memories, Marcus said softly. Good ones and bad ones all mixed together. That's life, I said. Good and bad all mixed together. You can't have one without the other. As we stood there, the front door opened and a woman came out, probably in her late 30s, with 2 children trailing behind her. She saw us standing there and smiled, walking down the driveway toward us. Can I help you? She asked, friendly but curious. I'm sorry, I said. We didn't mean to be creepy. We used to live here. I grew up in this house. We were just remembering. Her face lit up with understanding. Oh, how wonderful. Would you like to come in? See the place? We've made some changes, but the bones of the house are the same. Marcus and I looked at each other, surprised by the offer. Are you sure? I asked. We don't want to impose. Not at all, she said warmly. I'm Jennifer, and these are my kids, Lily and Sam. We've lived here for almost 10 years now, and we love this house. I'd be happy to show you around. We followed her inside, and I was immediately hit with a wave of nostalgia so strong it almost knocked me over. The layout was the same, the hardwood floors, the staircase, the archway between the living room and dining room. But everything else was different. New paint, new furniture, new life. Jennifer gave us a tour, pointing out the changes they had made. They had updated the kitchen, knocked down a wall to make the living space more open, converted my old bedroom into a home office. But the essence of the house was still there, the good bones my father had always talked about. When we got to what had been my parents' bedroom, I paused in the doorway. This was where my father had died, in the hospital, but this was where he had lived. Where he had slept next to my mother for 35 years, where he had gotten dressed for work every morning, where he had read before bed and dreamed his dreams. This is our room now, Jennifer said softly, sensing my emotion. I hope that's okay. It's more than okay, I said. I'm glad the house is being lived in, loved. That's what it deserves. We spent almost an hour there, walking through rooms and sharing stories. Jennifer and her family listened with interest, and they shared their own stories of the house, the memories they were making. It felt like a passing of the torch, an acknowledgement that the house had a life beyond our family, that it would continue to shelter and protect and provide a home for generations to come. As we were leaving, Jennifer stopped us at the door. Thank you for sharing your memories with us, she said. It means a lot to know the history of this place, to understand the love that was here before us. We'll take good care of it, I promise. I believe you, I said, and I meant it. The house was in good hands. Marcus and I walked back to our cars in silence, both of us processing the experience. That was harder than I expected, he finally said. But also, good. Healing, somehow. I know what you mean, I replied. It's like we got to say goodbye properly. To the house, to that chapter of our lives, to the people we were before everything changed. We hugged goodbye, holding on a little longer than usual. "I love you, sis," Marcus said. "Thank you for being my rock through all of this." "I love you too," I said. "And you were my rock just as much as I was yours. We did this together." Driving home, I thought about the journey we had taken. From that rainy day 10 years ago when I had driven to the house terrified of my mother's accusations, to today, standing in that same house with peace in my heart. It had been a long road, full of pain and tears and difficult conversations. But it had also been full of growth and healing and love. The estate inventory had been the catalyst, the thing that had forced us to confront the truth. But the real work had come after, in the days and months and years of choosing to forgive, choosing to understand, choosing to love despite the hurt. That work had transformed us, individually and as a family. I thought about my father, about his secrets and his shame and his desperate attempts to protect us. I understood him now in a way I couldn't have when he was alive. I understood the weight he had carried, the fear that had driven his decisions, the love that had motivated his sacrifices. I didn't agree with his choices, but I understood them. And in understanding, I had found forgiveness. I thought about my mother, about her grief and her accusations and her eventual apology. She had shown me what true strength looked like. Not the strength to never fall, but the strength to get back up. Not the strength to never make mistakes, but the strength to admit them and make amends. She had been my hero, not because she was perfect, but because she was brave enough to be imperfect and still keep trying. And I thought about myself, about the woman I had become through this experience. I was stronger now, more resilient, more compassionate. I had learned that I could withstand pain and come out the other side intact. I had learned that forgiveness was a gift I gave myself as much as the person I was forgiving. I had learned that family was worth fighting for, even when the fight was hard and the outcome uncertain. The story of my family, of the estate inventory and the secrets it revealed, had become a defining narrative of my life. It was the story I told my children, the story I shared with David when he asked about my past, the story that shaped how I understood love and loss and the complicated beauty of human relationships. But it wasn't a tragedy. Despite the pain and the betrayal and the loss, it wasn't a tragedy. It was a story of redemption, of healing, of love that was strong enough to survive anything. It was a story that proved that families could break and still come back together, that trust could be shattered and still be rebuilt, that love could be tested and still endure. Sweet home, or not? The question that had haunted me for so long finally had an answer. Both. It was both. The home of my childhood had been sweet, but it had also been built on illusions. The loss of that home had been painful, but it had also been necessary. And the home we had built in its place, the one made of honesty and forgiveness and chosen connection, was sweeter than anything that had come before. Years continued to pass, as they do. My children grew up and went to college and started their own lives. Marcus's grandchildren were born, and I became a grandmother myself. The family tree continued to grow and branch, new members joining through marriage and birth, the circle of love expanding ever outward. But the core remained the same. Marcus and I, still choosing each other, still showing up, still honoring the legacy our parents had left us. We gathered for holidays and birthdays and ordinary Sunday dinners. We told the old stories and made new memories. We laughed and cried and supported each other through life's ups and downs. And we never forgot the lessons we had learned during that difficult year. We never forgot that love requires honesty, that forgiveness requires courage, that family requires work. We never forgot that things are just things, that possessions can be lost or sold or stolen, but that the connections between people, the love that binds families together, that is eternal and unbreakable if you choose to protect it. On what would have been my father's 90th birthday, our entire extended family gathered at the beach. There were dozens of us now, spanning 4 generations. We had a picnic on the sand, the children playing in the waves while the adults sat in beach chairs and watched the sun sparkle on the water. I looked around at all these people, all connected by blood and love and shared history, and I felt overwhelmed with gratitude. This was my father's legacy. Not the money he had lost or the possessions he had sold, but this. This family, still together, still choosing each other, still loving despite everything. Marcus came and sat beside me, his hair now completely gray, his face lined with age but his eyes still bright. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "I'm thinking about Dad," I said. About how he would feel if he could see all of this. All of us, together, happy. Do you think he'd be proud? Marcus was quiet for a moment, watching his great-grandchildren build a sandcastle. "I think he'd be amazed," he finally said. "Amazed that we made it through. Amazed that we're still here, still together. And yes, I think he'd be proud. Proud that we didn't let his mistakes destroy us. Proud that we chose love over anger, forgiveness over resentment." I reached over and took his hand. "We did good, didn't we? Despite everything, we did good." "We did great," he corrected, squeezing my hand. "We took a broken family and put it back together. We took pain and turned it into healing. We took loss and turned it into love. That's not just good. That's extraordinary." As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink and purple, we gathered everyone together for a family photo. For generations, all connected, all choosing to be here, to be together, to be family. The photographer counted down, and we all smiled, and in that moment, I felt complete. This was home. Not a building or a place, but this feeling. This connection. This love that had survived secrets and accusations and loss. This family that had been tested and had emerged stronger. This legacy of forgiveness and resilience that we would pass down to our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Sweet home, or not? The answer was clear now. Sweet home. Absolutely, unequivocally, sweet home. Not because it was perfect, but because it was ours. Not because it was easy, but because it was worth fighting for. Not because we never struggled, but because we never gave up. The estate inventory, that surprising list that had revealed so much more than missing items, had been the beginning of our healing. It had forced us to confront uncomfortable truths, to see each other clearly, to choose between anger and understanding. And we had chosen understanding. We had chosen forgiveness. We had chosen love. And that choice, made over and over again in the years that followed, had made all the difference. It had transformed us from a family broken by secrets and loss into a family strengthened by honesty and love. It had taught us that home isn't about possessions or appearances or maintaining an illusion. Home is about the people you love and the connections you nurture and the choice to show up, even when it's hard. As darkness fell and the stars began to appear in the sky, we packed up our things and prepared to leave. But before we did, I walked down to the water's edge one last time. I stood there, my feet in the cool sand, the waves lapping at my toes, and I spoke to my father and mother, wherever they were. "Thank you," I said softly. Thank you for the life you gave me, for the lessons you taught me, for the family you created. Thank you for your mistakes, because they taught me grace. Thank you for your love, because it taught me strength. Thank you for everything, the good and the bad, because it all made me who I am. The wind picked up, blowing my hair back from my face, and I imagined it was them, my parents, reaching out to touch me one more time. I imagined them together, finally at peace, watching over the family they had created and feeling proud of what we had become. I turned and walked back to where my family waited, to David and our children, to Marcus and his family, to all the people I loved most in the world. And as we walked to our cars, as we said our goodbyes and made plans to see each other again soon, I felt a deep sense of peace settle over me. This was my life. This was my family. This was my home. And it was sweet, so incredibly sweet, not despite the struggles we had faced, but because of them. Because we had faced them together, and we had come out the other side stronger and more connected and more loving than ever before. The estate inventory had revealed a surprising list indeed. A list of love and sacrifice and forgiveness. A list of mistakes made and lessons learned. A list of a family that refused to give up on each other, no matter how hard things got. And that list, that surprising, beautiful, complicated list, was the greatest inheritance my parents could have left me.